Hello and welcome to another episode of Maternidad Sin Máscaras, or in English, Motherhood Without Mask. This is a space where we remove unrealistic expectations and open, honest, human conversations about what motherhood really looks like. This podcast was created with a very clear purpose to educate, humanize, and walk alongside mothers, especially during one of the most beautiful stages of life, but also very intense transitions in life. Here we hold three pillars: educating our perinatal community through certified perinatal and postpartum professionals. We also hold a space for real motherhood stories in our second pillar, from conception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum and early motherhood. And our last pillar are for stories of women who mothers while still holding dreams, roles, careers, and personal aspirations. Because here we believe something deeply important. Motherhood does not erase who you are, it expands your identity. It's an extension of who you are. Maternidad Sin Máscaras is a safe space where we validate, empathize, and build community, because no mother should feel alone in this season of their life. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Juda. I'm an associate marriage family therapist. I am a perinatal and postpartum mental health specialist, postpartum coach, facilitator, mentor, and so many other roles, and a mom of two. My daughter this year, 2026, is going to be 6 years old, and my baby boy is going to be 2 years this 2026. Today, I'm joined by our dear Cynthia, who is here to share one of her vulnerable stories during postpartum, as well as how has her upbringing affected how she has been raising her little one. So I just want to say thank you, Cynthia, who is a wife, Latina mom, and educator, who is a first-gen Mexican American, for being in our episode today. And I want to bring you along in this space so you can share more about who you are, what brought you onto this episode, and where are you in the world, because I'm bringing a lot of different guests into my podcast that are located in different parts of the world.
All right. Hi, Juda. Thanks for having me. And I'm so privileged that you want to share my story.
Thank you, Cynthia. And if you want to share a little bit of like, who is Cynthia? What are you working on? And where are you located? If you want to share that in more of a broadly sense.
Yeah. So my name is Cynthia and I live in the state of Wisconsin in the United States. And like Juda mentioned, I am a wife, a Latina mom, Mexican American. I'm raising a 5-year-old to be a bilingual um child, and my story starts with my parents immigrating to the United States. And when they became residents, they decided to move to the state of Washington. So I was born over there, and then they came to Wisconsin. I was pretty much raised here in Wisconsin, but my identity was always like questionable. Like I never felt, como dicen en español, ni de aquí ni de allá. So I really struggled growing up, like knowing, okay, where do I fit in? Because I was, I'm the oldest out of three. I have a brother and a sister, and we're each 6 years apart. And I was the only one that, being the oldest, I had to translate and do everything for my parents. My parents never learned English, so I had to be like, that typical, which I know a lot of you might identify yourself, translating for our parents. And you just felt it like kind of like a burden, like translating, and you didn't want to like feel embarrassed translating in Spanish. And back in the day, um, because I'm 34 right now, so this is like early 2000s that like just speaking Spanish in public was, it just seemed a little uncomfortable. And when I had to translate for my parents, I just wanted to like go hide somewhere. And I really just wanted to fit into the American culture. And it wasn't until I got to college, being a first gen um, graduate from a 4-year college, I majored in psychology and I was purposeful in my major. And besides psychology, I majored in Spanish because I really wanted to improve my Spanish skills. I know how to speak the language, but I didn't really know how to read or write. And when I had professors that were from Spain or Chile and from other countries in South America, I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, I want to go back to my roots and my culture and my identity. Um, so I decided to really hustle and start practicing more of my Spanish. I cried when I had to do my first essay in college, and at the time, my now husband, he's born in Guadalajara, so he was better with the Spanish, so he had to help me kind of draft my essays, and I was just like, I just felt like in that moment a no sabo kid because my Spanish was like choppy and I just had to like live through it, not feel embarrassed and be purposeful of like, okay, I have to really go back to my roots and learn this really well. And that eventually led me to be interested in a career. Instead of psychology, I went the other route and I did education. And I decided to become a bilingual teacher. And being a bilingual teacher, the majority of the time I taught Spanish. So I really needed to perfect my Spanish skills. Um, and I was like learning along with the kids how to read in Spanish, how to comprehend, because one thing is reading words, but then the other one is like really comprehending what you're reading. So then that the fact of like me in college realizing that okay, I have to go back to my language and becoming a bilingual teacher really just inspired me everything else into the person that I am today, into the mom that I am today, and the reasons why I really want to focus on emphasizing the importance of raising a truly bilingual child since they're little and not have to wait until college to kind of realize, oh, I should have put more effort into my culture and my language instead of like trying to just fit in into the American culture and forget about who I am and where I came from. And I feel that's completely normal with us probably millennials trying to, um, take a lot of the roles of an adult at a young age and then growing up and maturing and realizing, okay, I have to like step back and start, healing or breaking generational patterns.
Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for sharing your background and the way you were raised and how it impacted you being an adult. Nevertheless, how it has impacted you in a motherhood, because I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of listeners, a lot of different viewers that are going to resonate, who are going to connect with and identify, like you mentioned, with the pieces of your story that you're sharing. First gen, translator, having to have these responsibilities at a very young age, becoming your own person and trying to navigate higher education, the workforce on your own. And then adding being a mom that is trying to break generational patterns. And I know for myself that I can raise my hand and say, yep, I'm checking all of those boxes and I can clearly identify with some parts of Cynthia's story because everyone, although we can share some similarities, we all have our own stories. So thank you for that vulnerability, that honesty, and really trusting me and this platform and my podcast to share your story, because I know that many women are for the first time sharing what their upbringing was like and that how it has impacted their motherhood journey. So I have a question here for you. A lot of the times, pregnancy and motherhood are often very romanticized, especially with how much access we have to social media nowadays. We see glowing bellies, peaceful births, and women who seem to bounce back emotionally from the very beginning. How was your actual motherhood experience compared to what you expected?
Yeah, this is a big question and I have a lot of components to it. My expectations really, I got pregnant at so I was married like 11 months into my the marriage and then found out I was pregnant. And it took us by surprise. But I would say that my son is like I'm a big believer in God. So um I always see my son as like that angel that I really needed in that moment in my life. And I had my son at the age of 27, no, 28, almost turning 29. And before I even got pregnant, I was knew that um there were when I got pregnant in 2020. Well, I had my son in 2020 during COVID. So the expectations, I didn't really have any in mind, like how motherhood would be. I just kind of like went with the flow of like, okay, got pregnant. Now I'm going to be a mom. And I was just looking for books more in relation to how to prepare for labor. So I found this book and it taught me techniques on how to control my breathing during labor. But besides that, I was like really naive into the topic and I didn't really do much research, probably because of the COVID. I wasn't really focusing on that. And once I got pregnant, I we were one of the first round of people that got sick with COVID. And it was in the moment where the news kind of projected it as like, okay, like your life is going to like end if you have COVID. And I was pregnant and I was like very scared. But thankfully nothing major happened. But besides getting the virus, I also lost my sense of taste and smell during pregnancy. I didn't want to take photos. And on social media, I kept seeing like these women like glowing and just with beautiful bellies. And I just didn't feel that desire to like show my belly. Body image for me during pregnancy was really huge. Because growing up, I had a lot of body image issues and I would stop eating. I wasn't really diagnosed with any eating disorders or anything, but just like the whole body image during my pregnancy really affected me. So I feel that has to do with it. Um, and I also lost my sense of taste and smell during my pregnancy. I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which that affected me in the way of like, okay, I had to be purposeful in like how I move my body and what I eat. And then now thinking back, I feel like I had early symptoms of depression because sometimes at night I would wake up and I would just like wake up so scared and just yell like I don't want to be a mom or I don't want to have my child. I was just like starting to at the moment I didn't see it as depression, but it was starting to come up. Um, and then when I was, ready to have my son, everything was projected to be a natural labor. I even dilated to 8 centimeters without any epidural, just with like these breathing techniques. But then my son's heart rate started to drop, and they told me that I needed an emergency C-section. So then right away, all the doctors were like rushing in. I had to sign this paperwork. I didn't even know what I was signing. Um, And then they even told me, like, do you want to walk or do you want a wheelchair into the surgery room? The room was like right next door, so it wasn't too far. And I don't know where I got the courage from, but I was like, I'm walking. So I walked, and just as I arrived in the room and I sat down, I had a contraction, and then they put the anesthesia and everything. And then after that, my son was born, but then he needed help with like respiratory because he kind of swallowed some liquids. And um, that's where like I feel my postpartum journey kind of like started. And I didn't see my son right away. I didn't get to like put him on my chest right away because he needed assistance with his respiratory. So I didn't really feel when they brought my son in the room, I didn't feel that love at first sight that I always hear women talking about. And I have a lot of cousins or family that they have kids and they have these labors so fast. They love their baby right away. And every time I like think about it, I always get like emotional because I'm like, oh, why didn't I feel that? What was going on? And then that's where I feel like the depression started to come. And when I got home with the baby, like, yes, family members kept coming and everything, but I feel like the depression was getting worse over time because I felt very sad all the time and I felt lonely. Even though my husband was like the biggest supporter ever and he took out charge of all the responsibilities in the house, and my mom and sister would come over and help me, or my mother-in-law, sisters-in-law, everyone. But deep inside, I still felt so lonely. I knew I had to take care of this child, and I did. I was really like, responsible and caring, but it really took me a lot of effort. And I feel like I was just doing it as part of like a sacrifice versus like I wasn't doing it because I'm enjoying this moment in my life. Um, and I feel the depression lasted like probably 2 years, 2.5. I did go with doctors and tell them this. They offer medication right away, but I was like, nope, I'm not doing medication. So I opted for other type of methods that I can share a little bit later. And that's where like my postpartum um, and postpartum depression kind of started after having my son.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia, for sharing like your whole perinatal experience. And again, for those that are new to this channel or don't quite know what perinatal entitles, is basically from conceiving, pregnancy, labor, and up to the 2-year mark of a postpartum. Usually, I just kind of break it up into perinatal and the postpartum experience after labor, but. Yeah, just taking a moment and, sending you a virtual hug for, everything that you have experienced, because I know that a lot of us, I know, including myself, went through many years of experiencing depression. And I always say double depression because it was like postpartum depression related to my mothering and depression for other things. And then I had double anxiety because it was postpartum anxiety, but then anxiety of other things that didn't have to do anything with my motherhood. But validating and bringing your experience to life, and the importance of like naming, because sometimes it's just a lived experience within our mind and with our body. And sometimes, and I know for myself, when I don't give it a name or share, or I'm just kind of lost in like, what is happening with me? I start to internalize and blame myself, and I find myself like the culprit of everything. Well, I'm a bad mom. Well, I didn't prepare. I didn't read the books. I didn't ask for help, or I'm not producing, or I'm not drinking, or I'm not intaking enough, nutrients, or having a balanced diet or exercise, like all of these things that we start, to kind of, like I mentioned, find that the culprit. But thank you for mentioning also that part of like, I had already had these past experiences with body image and all of that it entitles. And, it kind of carried on into my pregnancy where I didn't desire. And I know for my first pregnancy, I was very like happy showing pictures here and there. But when it came with my son, I was just really tired. And I said, wow, it's a lot of work to be with my toddler being pregnant in the summer and almost being due. My son was born in August 2024. It was a lot of work. I'm like, I don't have time. I don't feel pretty. I don't feel like glowy, beautiful. I'm like, no, I don't really like how I'm looking or feeling. But and I think that a lot of the times we don't hear these stories of mothers. And again, we just kind of stay quiet and carry all of this silence with us. And yes, a lot of the times it's like we think it's going to go a certain way and it doesn't for, whatever reasons maybe. And I know in your case, it was like an emergency that, everything was going well. But then this happened, so we had to segue to an emergency C-section. And a lot of women during labor or their pregnancy and postpartum go through many perinatal losses and grieving, emotional grieving, because maybe not necessarily it's a loss of a life of somebody, but yet we are grieving the labor that we wanted. We are grieving the type of pregnancy that we wanted because COVID, we're COVID moms. So on top of everything of our stories, we are COVID moms. And before I get into more of this postpartum experience and hey, why so many women continue to feel alone and sad, even though they have maybe a solid or a pretty good support system or maybe a go-to person, we continue to feel this way. But before we get into that, yeah, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, everything you said, I wish somebody was there for me when I was going through that because just in the Mexican culture, like we don't talk about that. Like I feel like when I was starting to share with my suegra or with my mom, like, oh, I have postpartum depression. And then my suegra started to realize that she probably also had it because she had similar symptoms. And then so a lot of like women in my family started to realize they also went through this, but nobody talked about it. And then the breastfeeding is a different like a story that like how you mentioned like you just feel that you feel like what's wrong with me, what's wrong with my body. The breastfeeding hit me really hard too because being a teacher I had to teach online and I couldn't keep up with breastfeeding and teaching online. At that moment I was teaching kinder students um like 24 I felt like I was working 24/7 because it wasn't just teaching 8 hours a day in front of a computer. You had to plan and you had to like prepare the class for the next week, or grade test or all these things. And navigating that with breastfeeding, at the same time with like leaving my son at like 2 months to go back to work, all of that just kept piling up. And I just feel that also had to do with like making the depression even, more intense. And the breastfeeding too, like it still affects me, even though my son is 5, it still affects me when I know that like friends or family members just had a baby and they can easily just breastfeed, or the baby latched and or they're pumping and producing so much milk. And it's just like I wish I would have had, I don't know, I just wish like my body was able to produce more. But then I think back and I was like, I was under so much stress in so many ways. And I was only able to breastfeed my son 2 months. And that was another type of like grieving type of stages, besides grieving my old life or my old body, because not bouncing back to your previous body is another phase that you have to pass and grieve. I also had to grieve the fact that I couldn't provide, that experience to my son and to myself, and like breastfeeding and being more, I don't know, just doing it longer. And even up to this day, um, I just think, oh, I wish I would have had more success with that. Hopefully if I get pregnant again, the story will be different, but right now I feel like I'm still grieving it because it's something that you can't forget what you went through. You just learn how to live with it, and just how to navigate those emotions when they start to creep up again, even though 5 years have passed. Or I just feel like I'm not going to get over it 100%, but I just have to learn how to live with it. And I feel like therapy has helped me a lot, because as moms, we put a lot on ourselves and we blame ourselves a lot. And sometimes we kind of have to like have some grace. Um, but it's really hard to do. Like it's really hard to have grace with ourselves. So
Yeah, certainly see that. Thank you so much for yeah, that, openness, that honesty with yourself, with, again, I'm saying the platform, because I'm sure there's so many moms that are going to identify, connect with your story. And I'm like, yep, yep. I think I went through so many, um, like grieving stages, like for my own self, aside of being a mom, and then as a mom, and then COVID and all of these things. And a lot of the times I'm like, why, even though I'm in the mental health field, why did I experience depression so severely? Why did I have these really strong, dark thoughts of not being here anymore? And it's a lot of the times it's like, I was healthy, my baby was alive, like everything. Yes, it was pretty traumatic, the labor experience, but everything went smoothly. And then yeah, sometimes it's like, why? Like, why couldn't it just gone a little bit more smoother, have more like that rapid connection with my daughter? And I know that so many women were in your shoes or are in your shoes when it comes to breastfeeding, because yes, it has a lot of great benefits. It's like the go-to method to feed our children, but it doesn't really measure the quality of our motherhood through the way that we feed our little ones, because we are in a system, especially in the US, where it's really like impossible to do a whole year of exclusive breastfeeding when you need to go back to work. A lot of workplaces don't have like a clean, sterilized, proper space to pump. And if they, or yeah, to pump or to even have your baby with you breastfeeding, right? Nevertheless, so we're not in these like conditions where we are, prompted to continue our exclusive breastfeeding. That's why we have to go to different methods, whether it's, a combination formula, pumping, or all three of them, or whatever the situation may be. But again, it's part of the system that we live in the US, that just makes it really, really difficult. And I know that you touched on a lot on another point of these cultural expectations that we have, because I'm also Mexican American. My parents are immigrants from Mexico, from the state of Jalisco and the city of Guadalajara. They're from Guadalajara, where we have this academic term called Marianismo. Marianismo being that, the woman is going to sacrifice it all and is going to be the last one for her family, because that's her caretaking role. And that's how maybe it shows through how much she loves and really cares about her family. She's going, and there's this phrase that I always share along that women are kind of conditioned to say, voy a morir por mis hijos. I'm going to die for my children. And so I said, wait a minute, I don't, yes, I think all of us, we would give our lives for our kids in any circumstance, but why not live? Like, why not live for our children? Which means let's take care of our mental health. Let's take care of our well-being, our physical health, our, spiritual, our heart, our purpose, or whatever, your aura, whatever you want to call it, and live for our children. Because in essence, when we take care of ourselves as women who are caretakers, it's going to be a benefit in the long run for our children. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I feel that the vivir para mis hijos, now kind of like since you phrased it that way, I feel like personally I have been doing that through my journey of like healing because when my son was born, I was not expecting this like como caja de Pandora of traumas to open up. And it was just crazy because I was like cleaning the bathroom and then out of nowhere, my thoughts kept like rushed through and it took me back to my childhood in that moment when I was cleaning the bathroom. And it took me back and then it took me back to like what I experienced growing up during my teen years. My teen years and early 20s were really rough for me because my parents were going through a lot of situations at home and in their marriage, and then they eventually separated. And when I graduated college, my dad got deported to Michoacan and he got deported. And for me in that moment, my family of origin just became it just like for me, I considered it like, okay, I don't have a family anymore. Because at that time I wasn't married yet. I wasn't married yet, and I just took that time as like, okay, I don't have a family anymore. My dad just got deported. My mom is a single mom now. Now I have to act like I'm the man of the house. Because my brother, I mean, we're 11 years apart with my brother, so he wasn't going to take that responsibility. He was very little. Um, so I feel like that also affected me in like this trauma opening up when I had my son, and I had a lot of like just rencor towards my dad. Um, and I feel that's the moment where like, okay, I'm going through a lot of mental health situations here, and I have to find help and I have to heal this. If not, I'm going to like eventually take it off on my husband or my son or something will happen. Um, and that's where I continue my therapies. And there was a moment where like I needed therapy twice a week. Like it was that severe that I just needed. And there were like triggers during my weeks or months if I had like family events or situations here in my local city that it would bring back those memories. And then I needed to talk to my therapist right away because I would enter this phase of like, I don't even know if it was anxiety. But it was just like this phase of like, I just felt I needed to escape. And I felt I needed to be alone, nobody bother me. And all this came with like the postpartum. And I was not expecting this to happen. But I feel that that's why I said, like in the beginning, that my son had to come in the right moment in my life. Because I feel like if I didn't have like a child in the present moment, I truly believe that I would still be the old Cynthia I was before. And it has taken me a long time to accept that I don't want to be that old Cynthia that I used to be. I have to accept this new version of myself. Um, and it has taken me a lot of years in therapy. I started my therapy in 2017, and I'm still in therapy now, but now it's less. It's only once a month, so the frequency has reduced a lot. Now the topics don't relate to my childhood or my teen years. Now it relates more to me as a mom and why am I feeling guilty, or as a wife, because having children also does affect your marriage and the dynamic of the relationship. So it you can just see like how when you start your healing process, how you have to heal that inner child inside, and then how like when once you do that, it allows you to like see life in a different way and focusing on the positives. Because I used to be a person that focused on the negatives every time. I still do sometimes, but it's less. But now I'm trying to look at the positive about, being a mom and being a wife, or the positives in my life, versus feeling that I always deserved negative energy around me. Because when I was growing up in that childhood and teen years and early college years, like I was surrounded by a lot of this negative energy going on between my parents. So I just feel like I carried that on. And I feel like it has taken me a lot of years to break that generational patterns and to not carry it into my marriage. Because if not, then my son will kind of carry that chain again and those patterns. So I was the one that I decided to like put a stop to it. But it's not easy because you are trying to navigate with like the current world. And then I'm a working mom. I have career goals. I want to live my marriage and motherhood a different way than what my parents were able to. Um, and I appreciate the work that my parents did with what they could and how they raised me. But I was the one that made the decision to like break those patterns, even if I was like the um como en español se dice la mosca en la sopa, because I feel like by changing these patterns, my family, I have felt like my family hasn't really understood the reasons why, or they always see me as like, why are you doing it that way? Or my family is very traditional. And I feel like if I do something different and I'm starting to break those patterns, they realize it and they're like, oh, like, why are you doing that? And they just want to like, I don't know, put you down. I don't know, like just put that negative energy around um around myself. And I had to take distance even with my family because it's like, okay, you're not helping me right now in this phase of like healing. So I have to be purposeful of like the people I really do want to be around, even if you're a cousin of mine or an aunt. Um, so yeah, but I really had to learn about boundaries. And I feel like in my personal experience in my household, boundaries didn't really exist. So I feel like I had to learn that too.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, again, because I'm sure that even for myself, again, I'm like checking, like, yep, yeah, that's me. I experience a lot of, things that you are sharing. We are breaking generational traumas. We are continuing to heal our inner child. We are applying gentle parenting techniques with our little ones and applying it to ourselves, because it's like, how can we apply with our child if we never really saw it growing up or it was used with us? So that's already a challenge in itself. And going back to what you were mentioning, because I know for myself, I experienced something similar of like, I had already been in therapy. I was already working with my inner child. I was at peace with a lot of the things that had happened to me growing up, being a parentified child. And all of a sudden, like you mentioned, the Pandora opens up again. And I'm like, why? Like, why is this reemerging? Like, why is it still, boiling at top and, spilling out if I'm supposed to be caring and just focusing on motherhood? And the reality is that all of our happy hormones are abruptly detached from within our insides. I mean, this is very graphic. So
Yeah.
leave with our placenta. So estrogen, which help us with feeling radiant, confident, connected to ourselves and purpose and desire. And then progesterone, which helps us feel like more calm, grounded, emotionally regulated, just in tune with our nervous system. They leave with our placenta. And this is why a lot of women within 2 weeks after giving birth, they feel, these ups and downs of mood swings. It's not because there's something wrong with us. It's just neurological science and, chemically imbalances that we are experiencing. But beyond those 2 weeks, if we're feeling constantly the same, it can turn and become to postpartum depression. But here is the question, right? And throughout my work and volunteerships and a lot of things that I'm doing, it's kind of like, okay, I'm already past the 2 weeks. Okay, I'm already past the 2-year postpartum mark. Like, why is the Pandora box still like flowing out? So I don't know. I just like came up with this like volcano metaphor of, hey, sometimes, it kind of like a volcano has that top part. It's like where the placenta, I don't know, I'm saying it's where the
Yeah.
placenta sits. Se la arranca. So they rip it apart and that volcano starts to erupt. And we can't make the volcano stop because it's just something, science and natural, something natural that is occurring like a volcano. We can't tell it, oh, stop. Or like, don't be too, like the viscosity of it, don't be too thick, like be like less runny or less, like we can't control that. And, sometimes we just can't control how we're going to be healing. And then all of these things just start to surface and to reappear. And, even though the volcano, maybe feels really, really intense within maybe the 2-year mark that is called the baby blues.
Mhm.
Some of us, because of our past experiences, that volcano feels like very, very active throughout so many years, even though we're doing the work, even though we are supported, even though we attend groups or have friends or have loved ones, because I know for myself, it's like, why do I continue to feel this way? And again, it's something natural that is happening within our bodies, that our happy hormones need a lot of nutrients. So it's kind of like, what makes this volcano? And I tell a lot of women, and even for myself, it's not that the depression, the anxiety is going to go away, because at some extent it's important, right? It's important to be like, oh, I feel sad for this, or I feel worried about this, to do like a check-in of, hey, did you feed your child? Hey, did you take them to the doctor? But sometimes it just feels so heavy that, it just kind of affects our day-to-day life and within ourselves, and the relationship we have um, with other people. And like, again, like I was mentioning, we're doing the work. And what has come up for me, and I know that I've been finding my own answers. Unfortunately, I haven't had like a therapist or somebody. Yes, I've had so many, like, yes, I actually started like therapy in like, well, like I think it was 2015. When I was like in my senior year of undergrad college. That's when my whole like therapy process happened, and then continue on. But I don't think, no one has really like hit it on the nail and been like, hey, Judah, this is why. This is what's going on in postpartum. This is what's happening after that 2-week mark, or this is why it connects to your childhood. So here is my little like answer for myself and for many of those that maybe were a parentified child. I told myself, I just want to be a little girl. I want to be a little girl again that is taken care of. I'm just so burnt out of taking care of others. And unfortunately, yes, the up and downs of my hormones in postpartum and being in lockdown with COVID made it even harder for maybe having that volcano to just kind of settle a little more. But that was the reality. I just want to be a little girl. I don't want to take care of anyone. I don't have, and especially for postpartum, I didn't feel like I had the physical stability to take care of my little one, the mental capacity to take care of my little one. And it was like I couldn't leave my house anymore. It was just the hospital, car, and home and the room, and that was pretty much it. And anywhere I can go within the house, because it was pretty scary to be like, okay, I'm just gonna go around the block, or I'm just gonna go to the park. Like you just don't know. Maybe you can contract. So I don't know, or even go to the stores. So that's a little bit of my like answer of like darn. I just want to be taken care of in this very vulnerable stage of my life. And I know that you also mention of pivoting and raising your child in a different way that you were raised by, which takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy. I facilitate resilient parenting classes where we teach six resilient habits to create a more safe, secure, and loving attachment for our little ones. And these classes are for parents or caregivers with children 0 to 3 years old. And I totally understand. It's a lot, like because we're learning the information. One thing is to learn it, and another thing is to apply it. So it does come with, putting it into practice, learning how to apply it when it doesn't go well. It's like, well, this is how you should put consequences. And I'm like, it didn't work out. My kids are, they're just being kids. They're just acting. So it's a lot of work that we have to go into. So it's a very, yes, like I mentioned before, very vulnerable time to be in our lives. And sometimes it's really hard to close that Pandora box, like you mentioned, or like the volcano image that I'm saying. But slowly with time, it just feels a little more at ease. I wouldn't say easier because sometimes it's really tough
No.
again to just kind of like, okay, let's put it back again, or hey, like don't feel so active, in my volcano metaphor, don't feel so active. Um, so yeah, before we like head into our last question, is there anything you would like to touch on like these really big things that I just mentioned?
Yeah, with kind of like closing that Pandora box or, calming the volcano, um you have to be ready to heal and you have to take it at your own pace. The rancor that I had with my dad, I didn't heal it until 2024. So it was just 2 years ago that we did a trip to Mexico and I paid my dad's flight to meet us in Guadalajara. And for the first, when I picked up my dad at the bus station, I just cried like never before. And I was raised in my parents like just raised me because the way they were raised, that's how they did it with us. They weren't really like, parents that hugged us a lot or that told us I love you. They were just colder in their emotions. Obviously they showed us that they cared about us and providing for us and everything in different ways, but it wasn't like the caring piece, the nurturing. It wasn't there, but I for the first time felt the need to hug my dad and I was just like crying. And I wasn't ready until since 2014 until 2024. That's 10 years that um I really couldn't perdonar a mi papá until I was ready. And that took me a lot of like therapies to like feel ready to talk to him. Up to this point, I don't feel the need to talk to my mom about anything, but I feel like I kind of healed in that side. But with my dad, I just had a lot to heal. But I took my time and I was patient with the process. So in this healing journey, you really have to truly want it and you have to give yourself time, even if it takes so many years.
Mhm.
But you really have to be ready for it.
Mhm.
And the way I decided to kind of like start raising my son and especially like not only the bilingual side with like learning by English and Spanish and becoming fluent in both languages, I always knew that I wanted to be a nurturing mother. And I always tell my son, te amo, and I hug him a lot. And I feel like I want to keep doing that even if he's married.
Mhm.
Um, but I one of the ways that I have decided to raise my son differently. I mean, there's so many ways, but a couple, it's like, the nurturing and letting him know that, okay, I value him and his presence and giving him hugs and like just gentle words like that. Obviously I'm not perfect. Sometimes my mom's sometimes I sound like my mom when I get angry. And I'm like, okay, let me take a breath. So sometimes like the breathing exercises for myself have been the ones that really help me um not react the same way that my mom used to react with me. Obviously the spanking, I took that away. I decided not to do that. So I have been trying to raise my son more on the gentle parenting and it has taken me time to learn it because I read a lot of books in Spanish and English. I read books about it. It's hard to really apply it in the practice. Like it's hard to put it to action in the day to day. But I have been noticing that now that my son is 5 and I have more of this mental capacity, since now I have healed quite a bit of stuff, I have the mental capacity to try new things and not be embarrassed to try them. Like there's some strategies about like um act goofy or create a tantrum in front of your son, like pretend that you're yelling or
Mhm.
crying like him or whatever. And I tried that the other day and I read about this strategy like years ago, but I felt embarrassed and not ready to try it
Mhm.
until recently. And then my son stopped the tantrum. Like it was like that easy fix. Or I just like, I'm starting to realize that I'm starting to apply these strategies that I read years ago
Mhm.
now because of the healing process I have made. And I'm able to just apply them now. And I'm more interested in applying these strategies because now that my son is older, I feel like that allows for a little bit more wiggle
Mhm.
area versus when you're in the early stages of motherhood with like lack of sleep or you forget to eat as a mom. You barely have time to for yourself, like you're in survival mode, like you don't have time to be applying those strategies, especially in the terrible twos, or I
Mhm.
consider them terrible 2, 3, 4, because that was my experience with my son. Not saying that every mom will experience that, but um, I just feel like during those years, I was just still trying to heal, and I wasn't ready to apply any of the gentle parenting strategies, but I kept reading about it, trying to put the effort into reading about it and understand it. And
Mhm.
then now I'm starting to see that, okay, what I read, now I'm actually ready to apply it. So sometimes it takes that, that patience, but sometimes you just want to fix it right
Mhm.
away. And it's just really hard to do that. And of course, the another big thing I have been trying to do is making sure that my son has a clear understanding of his culture and identity. That's why my husband and I, we decided to focus just on Spanish since he was born.
Mhm.
Um, until now, the only language we speak at home is Spanish. Even though my husband and I sometimes we don't follow the rule and we speak Spanglish, and my son right away corrects us, and he's like, "Mom and Dad, you're not supposed to be speaking English. We can only speak Spanish at home." So he's really good at the rule. He respects it, and that to me was really important because I really wanted him to become a fluent bilingual student at school, and I'm seeing the benefits of that. And ever since he was born, we have done trips to Mexico because I really wanted him to have a clear understanding of like, okay, this is the culture, this is where we come from. Even though, you're Mexican American, but it doesn't matter. Like, if you have a strong foundation, that's really going to create more connection and confidence as he grows up. And I just didn't want him to experience what I experienced, like feeling embarrassed to speak Spanish or feel embarrassed to where he came from. So I feel like that's a really big one for me right now, making sure that he has that like clear understanding, and taking him to Mexico because we have the privilege to do so.
Mhm.
And my parents didn't have that privilege to spend on vacation. Um, we never really went. I mean, my mom would take me and my siblings to Mexico, but I we never really made a trip to Mexico as a family. It was always like split. Either my mom would take myself or a sibling, or my dad would go by himself. So I never had that experience myself.
Mhm.
And my parents just couldn't afford it either. So now that I have the privilege to provide that, I want to take advantage of that and not only affect my son, but future generations, and if he has his own children in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia, for sharing. And I'm sure, and I keep repeating that there's going to be a lot of first gen eldest daughter of immigrants that are going to, feel this episode really deep in their hearts. And, I just want to take this time to, hug ourselves in a virtual way because wow, we are doing a lot of inner work. We are breaking so many generational patterns. We are getting ourselves out there and, honoring our aspirations, projects, the person who we are, raising our children in a different way where we also continue to honor and pay tribute to our culture, which is, through our food, language, traditions, and so many other things. And I really liked also what you mentioned, Cynthia, of healing takes a lot of time. And I tell people, I was in this, very rough spot for around like 5 years after I became on like that Pandora box, which in a more clinical manner we call it a psychic transparency, where the mom's unconscious opens up past memories, fears, wounds, and unresolved like trauma like start to surface. And again, it's like that whole volcano metaphor that's like, oh, I really can't. It's just, neurologically and biologically happening in my body, and I'm really trying my best here to continue to heal myself. And it's been like 5 long years, and I'm feeling a lot better this sixth year mark. So I always love to share. Everyone is their own book. We are at the chapter that we need to be. Things happen for a reason. Trust the process. Don't let go. Find support wherever um, you feel you're getting your support. And remember to continue to advocate for yourself. If you don't feel comfortable with the therapist, with the coach, with the healer, you can like please honor your needs. Please honor your inner voice, your inner ally, and look for something else that is going to benefit you, because a lot of the times, as a clinician, we think, oh, we must stay with this person because they're professional. But like I heard a phrase out there, we all wear different shoe sizes, so we're not going to be, the best fit for somebody, and vice versa, right? And for clinicians, the best ethical thing to do, it's like, hey, things might not be working out here, but I'm going to refer you to somebody else, or go ahead and look for somebody that suits your needs. And before we clock out, I would like to take this moment and hand you over the virtual mic. Is there a last message you would like to leave this episode with?
Yeah, I want to let other first gen Mexican American moms out there that you are not alone. Um, you just have to find your community, the support, and that can look different depending on the season in life you're in. You might need more support maybe in those early years. Maybe as your child or children grow a little older, that's a different season where you might still need the support, but it's a little less, or it might have to change. So just be okay with the change. And healing while raising a child, it's not easy because you're trying to heal your inner child yourself, break generational patterns while raising your child. And then if you decide to raise them bilingual, that adds another, it's another layer to the puzzle here. Um, and you just have to have a lot of patience and grace and follow your heart, your instinct. Like, just don't doubt about that. And if one of the biggest factor that helped me is my faith and believing in God and trusting in Him. So if you're big believer in like God or the universe or anything that will really, move you more forward besides your community and the support, like truly own it, and know that nothing will last forever, even though sometimes those seasons in motherhood seem that they have been there forever and you will never get out of it. But time goes by really fast. And when you least expect it, I mean, your children will be, in school and then like middle school and high school. And it's just crazy how time goes by. So really just try to enjoy the moments, even though they are really challenging. But as long as you have, faith and the support, you will be able to just surpass any challenge.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It was such an honor to have you here. And I want to leave moms with this message. If you're crying and don't understand why, if your past feels louder than ever, if you feel empty, disconnected, or unlike yourself, you're not failing. Your body is going through a revolution hormonally, neurologically, emotionally, psychologically, while learning how to sustain a little life that depends so much on us. This stage doesn't require more strength, it requires care, protection, and real support. Mothers living in survival mode need double, triple, and as much as the support, like mentioned before, of the support. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us on another episode of Maternidad Sin Máscaras, or Motherhood Without Masks, a space where we humanize motherhood, honor real stories, and make room for the whole woman behind the role of mom. Remember, your motherhood is valid, your timing is valid, your experience matters, and you as a woman are still deeply important. If this episode resonated with you, please leave a comment below, share it with another mom. And remember, you can find me on Instagram as JJ Postpartum Wellness, on TikTok, such as Juda Coach. And remember, this is a space to continue to learn about perinatal mental health, and hear real stories about motherhood. This is it for our episode today, and I will see you next on Maternidad Sin Máscaras. Adiós a todos.
Yeah, thank you.